Hola, ¿cómo están ustedes? In this module, we're going to be learning about irregular preterite verbs. In module 6, you learned about regular AR, ER, and IR verbs. You learned about some spelling changes, and you learned about stem changing preterite verbs. Now, let's talk about irregular preterite verbs. And we're going to divide them into two categories. We have the irregular group that comprises of different types. And then we have the special verbs that stand on their own because they don't have a particular pattern. Let's talk about that. Okay, we're going to start with the groups that I was just talking about. We have the U group, I group, and J group. What does this mean? That means that each one of these groups has special stems that you need to memorize for now. And we have given you Quizlet practice for that. The U group is comprised of the following verbs. And the reason why they're called U is because their stems have a U in them. For example, andar, the stem is anduv. So you're not dropping the AR and adding ending. You're changing the stem from AND to anduv. Caber, to fit, is cup. Estar, estuv. Poder, pud. Poner, pus. Saber, sup. Tener, tuv. So each of these verbs has its own stem. Then we have the I group. This means that the stem has the letter I. Querer is quis. Venir is vin. For these groups, the U group and the I group, they have the same set of endings. Okay? You have iste, o, imos, isteis, hieron. So check it out. When we conjugate the verbs, we simply take the stem and add these endings to them. They all have the same endings. Supe, supiste, supo, supimos, supisteis, supieron. Tuve, tuviste, tuvo, tuvimos, tuvisteis, tuvieron. Vine, viniste, vino, vinimos, vinisteis, vinieron. Now we have the J group. They're very similar to the I and the U group, except for one little thing. They have a J in them, and that changes one thing. Note, these are the stems that go with these verbs. Conducir, conduj, decir, dij, producir, produj, traer, traj. These are the endings for the J group, and they're almost identical, except for instead of I-E-R-O-N, you have E-R-O-N. So essentially you drop the I out. So for example, conduje, condujiste, condujo, condujimos, condujisteis, condujeron. Here are other examples. Dije, dijiste, dijo, dijimos, dijisteis, dijeron. Traje, trajiste, trajo, trajimos, trajisteis, trajeron. So for all irregular verbs, you have the new stem, which needs to be practiced and memorized. And then you have the endings that go along with those stems. And they're almost the same for all of them, except for ustedes, ellos, ellas, the J verbs drop the I out. Okay, now we have our special verbs. Okay, now these verbs kind of stand on their own, and they have a little bit of differences. Now, the verb dar, to give, it's an AR verb with ER and IR endings and no accents. And by the way, no accents on any irregular verbs ever. You will never see an accent. So let's talk about dar. Di, diste, dio, dimos, disteis, dieron. Ir and ser are identical conjugations, but in certain contexts, they'll of course mean different things because ir means to go, ser means to be, but their conjugations are identical. Fui, fuiste, fue, fuimos, fuisteis, fueron. Now, hacer is technically a member of the I stem changing group up here, okay? It actually has the same endings as the I stem changers, except the usted, el, ella form changes from a C to a Z to accommodate the S pronunciation. Hice, hiciste, excuse me, hizo, hicimos, hicisteis, hicieron. Okay, so that's only really a spelling change. Technically, it is a member of the I stem changers. And then we have ver, which is irregular only because it has no accent, but it actually has the regular ER and IR endings. Vi, viste, vio, vimos, visteis, vieron. These need to be practiced, and hopefully we have provided you guys with enough practice to help you learn them, understand them, and put them to use. Now let's get busy and do some practice.